Thank you very much for talking to us today. I read that you're a big fan of churches, and we are sitting here in the cathedral in Wellington. What is it about this space? What does it mean to you? What does it draw out of you?
I am a big fan of churches, but I think I probably see church as community first and foremost. It's a space of prayer and welcome and worship, and it's a place where people are fed and nourished and equipped and sent out from. So it's both a gathering and a sending place for community. And sometimes that's people of faith and sometimes that's people of no faith.
For a lot of people, and certainly for non-Christians, I think probably the Christian festival that they think of first is Christmas. But Easter is a really big deal for Christians. Just
Yes,
talk me through what that means to you.
Yeah, Christians would believe that God is the God of the impossible, and while Christmas celebrates the incarnation, the miracle of God coming to us in human form, Easter is the God who suffers with us, who identifies with us in the fullness of our humanity, as we celebrate Jesus being welcomed into a place, being falsely accused, being tortured, suffering betrayal, dying, and then the miracle of new life, the resurrection. You know, the tomb was empty on Easter Sunday. No one could find the body, and Jesus appeared to hundreds of people in the 40 days after his resurrection. And so for us as Christians, we are an Easter people. We are a people who know that while we suffer, while life is hard, we don't journey alone, and there is always hope, and there is redemption beyond death, that there is no darkness that the light of God can't penetrate, which is really important because we look at the world around us and we do see all is not well in the world. There's more at work than love and light. There is also the presence of darkness and hatred.
At this time of year, and I guess at the big festivals of Christianity, do you see that more people make the time to come to church, to gather together? And with the world, as you say, in a pretty precarious state in a lot of places at the moment, what are you anticipating this year?
I think, yes, people do tend to come and attend a church service more in our times of festival and feasting, Christmas and Easter. I think some of that is around family tradition. We settle into a pattern of familiarity that we may have had growing up. But we're also seeing here a resurgence of people who don't have a faith, but who are coming because they're curious. They're coming because they believe that there is probably more than we can know and tangibly prove physically in front of us. They want to be open enough in discovering what spirituality means for them personally. And so they may turn up as skeptics or as more open. We had a prayer vigil for Myanmar on Sunday night. We had 180 people turn up. And afterwards I had somebody who wasn't a person of faith say to me, you know, I came here because I wanted to see what it was like to stand in solidarity with people who are suffering in Myanmar. And I've been met with something and I can't put my finger on it. I don't know quite how to attribute what I'm feeling with, but thank you, and maybe I'll come back. And you know, for us, we want people to feel that they're welcome here, irrespective of their own personal position.
And from your perspective, has faith always been there for you? Is that something growing up, that you grew up within a family of faith?
Initially, no. My parents weren't people of faith. I was born and raised in Cyprus, and so my first kind of encounter, if you like, with the great mystery that's God was in a Greek Orthodox church as a very young child. But it wasn't until our family experienced some tragic circumstances. My mum started wondering what might be beyond death, if there was something beyond death. And so she started taking my sister and me to a church, and eventually we met some people of strong faith, and our family came to faith through them, really, through their witness, through how we saw God at work in their lives.
You grew up in Cyprus. Tell me a little bit about that, your background. How was it that you were in that part of the world and that you spent some time growing up there?
Oh, my dad was with the Royal Air Force there, and we got to travel around quite a lot. I loved being in Cyprus. My sister and I had a real free childhood. We had great liberty. It was quite a different era then. You know, school started early in the morning and was over by 1 o'clock. We were exposed to lots of different nationalities. When we did start going to church, there were 66 different nationalities represented in that community. And so really it was just an endless horizon of fun, opportunity to connect with different cultures and perspectives. And it was totally expansive. I loved it.
You spent some time there as a young child, but you have another love as well, which is dance. And you went to a boarding school that was a ballet school?
That's right, yeah. I went to Elmhurst, which is a school that's connected with the Birmingham Royal Ballet now, but I boarded there from 13 to 19 years old and trained to be a professional dancer. Absolutely loved it.
Tell me about how you got to that point though, because I guess you were taking dance classes as a child?
That's right, yeah. I actually had a New Zealand dance teacher in Cyprus, Jacqueline Owen, and she taught me dance in a school hall. And when I got to 12 years old, I knew it was something that I wanted to be doing professionally. She suggested going to the UK and auditioning for some places in professional dance schools, which I did. And then off I went at 13. I was terribly homesick for the first year, but it was a total privilege to be with other people who were as passionate as I was about movement and theatre, and learning and growing and exploring and being exposed to lots of different professionals in their fields. Was quite an eccentric time, but a real joy.
Eccentric in what way?
Oh, because we didn't have Ofsted then. That's like the, schools.
Like the Education Review Office, I
That's
guess.
right, yeah. Yeah, we would be sat in our geography class with our hair in curlers and get hauled out to do costume fittings and be rehearsing at midnight, and didn't follow a particularly standard approach to education. We had some unusual professional dance teachers teaching us with their foibles, whiskey and smoking in class, and but it was just part and parcel of being in that kind of theatrical environment. Things have obviously changed now.
For the better, do you think?
In many respects, yes. I think there's probably a greater sense of understanding of holistic well-being for students, but I wouldn't have changed anything about my education either in Cyprus or at ballet school.
What was it about dance and about ballet school that captured you so much?
I think it was knowing that you could not rely on having to be articulate verbally as an individual, but you could, in a way, it was escape into embodying a persona or a theme or a feeling through movement, an expression, and be part of something that was bigger than yourself. you were kind of creating an experience for people that was both visual but tangible, and being kind of flesh and blood, if you like, in the fullness of your physicality as a professional athlete through dance. Some of it, I mean, it's in a way, it's a bit like experiencing teamwork, because you're part of a company, it's not just solo work. You can achieve something inexpressible together, which transcends the ability to reason, and we can all connect with that. You know, if we go and see something, we go to a Kappa Haka group, and you can see something and feel something coming through which you can't put into words. And that's, you know, that's kind of on tap as a dancer. It's quite addictive, actually, in a way, when that's your passion and it's what you've worked towards. It's compelling. It's your life.
And you were a dancer and a choreographer and a teacher for the next 20 years?
20 years, yeah.
I suppose from the perspective of now, how do you look back on that time? What do you remember from it?
Oh, hard work. Yeah. Joy, pain, exhilaration. I mean, you know, the discipline of the daily class, you know, the excitement of working on a new piece of movement with a new choreographer, the joy of, as an animateur, that's to bring to life choreography for other people, and to see them being freed to explore not just the professional work itself or what it is they're creating from that, but to explore who they are as a human being through movement. Because I had the privilege of working with people who were asylum seekers and refugees, inmates in prisons, school kids, professional dancers, people from 4 years old to 87 years old, and to have the creative freedom to draw out of people something for themselves, so that even non-dancers are able to participate, because movement is movement. And we're all human. Movement is inherent in our humanity. So I found it totally life-giving to be able to facilitate that experience for other people.
The way you talk about dance, with its elements of ritual to it, of the daily class and that kind of thing, it almost sounds like a religious experience.
I think so. I mean, I think that's probably why I've ended up finding myself inhabiting a new calling, which came as a bit of a shock to me.
How do you make the transition from professional dancer choreographer to the priesthood?
Yeah.
Is priesthood the right word?
It is, that's the perfect word, yeah, the priesthood. I mean, I would say it wasn't really my idea, which sounds a bit odd, but it was very much a sense of call that developed over a number of years, about 7 years. And for me, it makes sense of who I am as, you know, as a disciple of Jesus. Disciple is the same root as discipline. We think of attending to learning and being formed and transformed in who we are as people, by who God is as love personified. And so to make that transition, I think of myself as a priest. I'm inhabiting time and space as a person, as a physical person. I'm, if you like, curating worship. So I'm representing people to God, and I'm representing God to people. And it's, you know, I even think of our bodies are cross-shaped, you know, and we as priests, we open our arms in welcome to people. We raise our arms to bless people with God's love. We are rooted first and foremost in the earth. You know, we're all made of the dust of the earth. And we, through our physiology, we're lifted up towards, we don't think of heaven as literally being physically up, but, you know, we think of connecting with the earth and with who God is in all of God's mystery, but we're also human. We have a horizontal plane to us, which is to be inclusive and welcoming and to reflect light and love to other people, even those we find hard to love.
There also seems to be a connection between the work that you did as a dancer and a choreographer in your body. Some of those skills, it feels like you're using in your job now in the church.
Yes.
What kinds of things do you think make that crossover?
I think it's probably an understanding of what I would say is our human need for proximity and presence. That, you know, we are, you know, we would pray that we're transformed by the renewing of our minds, but we're not a disembodied brain. And so when I'm ministering to people, I'm ministering as a human to other humans, and there are, you know, the physical needs of breaking bread, of pouring a cup of tea, of blessing, of anointing people with holy oil, of giving someone a lit candle, of welcoming someone in, of sharing peace. You know, we have in our services a kind of, it's like a moment of reconciliation in our services where we can't come before God if we are not prepared to be reconciled and share peace with one another. All of these are very normal human actions, but within our Christian faith, we would see God as taking symbols such as water, wine, bread, light, oil, and using them as an outward symbol of an inner transformation. And this isn't just peculiar to Christianity. You know, many other faiths and practices and religions would use these symbols in similar ways, but we would think about the great arc of how God has spoken to us in Jesus of being light and living water and pathways to peace. And for me, that's just part and it's kind of second nature, if you like. Maybe some of that's an overflow of being a dancer, but it's certainly linked in with priestly ministry.
You talk a lot about peace and things like the breaking of bread and that sort of connection with people. But I guess for a lot of people, especially thinking in the last few months, you know, the abuse in state care report came back. For a lot of people, the church does not represent that. It represents something quite different and quite a lot darker. How do you reconcile the experiences that many people have had, not necessarily with this church, but with the church more broadly? How do you reconcile that? How do you approach that situation?
I think one approaches that situation with great humility, sorrow. Sometimes there's nothing one can say easily. Anything one says is inadequate when addressing wrongdoing. And the church as an institution can make an apology, but until the church as individual members of a community makes more of an effort to better safeguard and look at how to face the much needed restoration It's very painful, but the church needs to take responsibility for the harm that has been meted out to people at the hands of representatives of the church that haven't been fit for purpose, haven't been up to the job. Because I would say God is a God of compassion, but God is a God of justice, and that means that justice must be done, and you can't escape the consequences of wrongdoing. You know, you've committed an atrocious crime against someone, you need to be held to account for that and to go through the justice system and to face the consequences of your, we would use the word sin. Obviously, it's, you know, you've broken the law, you've damaged people. That's not God's way.
Do you think the church has been brave enough in facing that?
Probably not. No.
Why do you think that is?
I think there's probably within our practices a sense of we deal with things amongst ourselves first and foremost, and we sometimes do not face up to the reality of what's taken place, and maybe it's easier to move someone sideways than it is to do the harder job of confronting head-on wrongdoing.
One of the other things about the church that maybe people don't know, or maybe people have forgotten, this particular church that we're sitting in this instance, is that, of course, you're right next door to Parliament, which, of course, was the scene of the protests a couple of years ago against the COVID mandates, amongst other things. This church stayed open during that time, and I think this church and New World up the road were the only two public spaces that were open in Thorndon at the time. Why was it important for you to keep the doors open at that particular juncture?
I think for me, if we're going to take seriously our commitment to be a place of prayer and presence and welcome, you don't get to pick and choose. We're going to be welcoming to you when it suits us on our terms, in our time frame that we can kind of manage to be comfortable around, but we're not going to be open and welcoming to you on your terms. So I saw the protest as, you know, in many respects, we were business as usual as far as we were able. I mean, I live next door to the cathedral, so I could just pop down. To be here, not all staff members were able to access because of the road blockades that were in place, but people were here gathered outside Parliament, camping on our ground. We were totally enclosed. We had people on every side of the building, on every spare available piece of land. That wasn't at our invitation, but we have to be there to minister to people who are not feeling that their voices were heard, or who were also coming and looking and inquiring and wondering. And so it was a great opportunity to be able to welcome people. You didn't have to have had 2 vaccinations to be able to come into the space to pray or to ask questions, to join in with our rhythm of prayer. And we held communion outside the front of the building because there was a decision made in place within the church that said, you know, we wouldn't offer communion unless you had had your double vaccination. So that was made available for people outside if they hadn't had their double vaccination. And it was just a privilege, actually, to be able to journey with people, to answer questions, to have kids in, learning about faith, exploring the space, creating their own prayers in different ways. We'd set up some quite creative means to do that. It was a a challenging time for us as a nation, but really important to me that we were open and available to those who wanted to access our space. Plus we got loads of toilets, so win-win. But actually the team who were over in Parliament, they had a little, kind of set-up team. They would come and they would clean the bathrooms, because we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in every day using the bathrooms. So they also took responsibility for helping manage all that opened up for us in terms of challenges with keeping things stocked and clean.
You've been here in Wellington as Dean, well, you're now Dean of the Cathedral, but you've been here in Wellington for 5 years. What drew you to Aotearoa, and how has being here enriched your life and your faith?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. I mean, I had no intention of leaving Winchester, where we were before coming here in 2019, but kind of inexplicably there was a sense of call, of being drawn here. I had a conversation with the previous dean, who, when thought that there would be a vacancy that would become available, and so I was keeping an eye open, but there was a whole series of quite unusual events where people that I didn't even know, like one elderly woman on a ferry to France came and told me before I got off, I know you don't know me, but I think God's told me to tell you that you're going to go to Wellington in New Zealand, because he's got a job there for you. So after a while, you kind of go, oh, okay, that's quite an unusual chance encounter with a total stranger on a ferry to France. So when the job did become available, I applied for it and went through an interview process. And everything fell into place. But what is so life-giving and exciting about being here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, is coming to a place where there is, in Te Ao Māori, a total sense of, we would call it a theology of place, of finding your tūranga waiwai, of the whenua, the land, the earth that we're all part of, that I spoke about earlier, the placenta, if you like, of our existence in who we are as spiritual beings, as well as human beings and doings. It just is like a tangible sense of identification for me. And so I've got a lot to learn. I've got a lot to explore around that. There's always an ever-expanding sense of possibility and opportunity. But I know as a church here, we've got a lot to explore, a lot to learn, a lot to offer, and a lot of redress, still to take place. I mean, I've got given an office to Hera Clark, who's actually the archbishops for all three tikanga, for tikanga Māori, Pacifica and Pākehā, as the commissary for reconciliation and restoration into abuse in church care. She's in my old office now in this building, because we are committed, just returning to that former part of our conversation, we are committed to being different. We bear the pain of the mistakes and abuses of the past, and we are committed to being different for the present and the future. And that's the work not just of one person, but that has to be a collective decision that we're going to learn and grow and be formed and transformed more as we journey together into the future.
Because I suppose, how much do you see that you have to lead a process of transformation here? Because certainly at one point, Christianity was a significant part of the colonizing force that came here. How do you bear that legacy, and how do you shape what it can become?
I think Christianity was probably here before. I think Maori speak of having already met and encountered God. I think one walks that journey again with great care and humility. For me, Terore of Ngā Kuku, I don't know if you're familiar with her story. She was murdered in a raid, and she had a Gospel of Luke in a kete around her neck that was stolen, and the person who took it eventually came to Terore's father, who did know Christ, who had at her funeral preached not utu but forgiveness for the killers, and this amazing reconciliation took place. And because of that extending the hand of peace and reconciliation, Terore's Gospel of Luke then led to Maori sharing the good news of God's reconciliation for us with other Maori. So this isn't colonial domination, this is us being witnesses to God at work here. I can feel weighed down by the weight of the past, about history that I didn't know anything of before I came here. As a European, I can feel ashamed of the damage that was done in the past, but I can also feel very proud. We would see the Anglican Church as being the midwife to the Te Treaty of Waitangi. And as our 3 tikanga constitution as an Anglican Church bears witness to, we see ourselves as being woven together in our cultural streams of distinct but united because of God's work of reconciliation, despite the damages done in the past. And again, it's a long journey of humility, of restoration, of having to rightly be held accountable, to see redress taking place, and to commit to live differently both now and into the future.
Thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
It's been really interesting talking to you. Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you.
Cheers. Kia ora.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. Yes.